3D Mickey and Minnie Mouse as part of my classic 3D Disney series by Hotpinkzebrapolish. Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to be starting a classic Disney little nail art series of 5 designs. So in today's video it's going to be Mickey and Minnie Mouse on one nail, and then there's also going to be Goofy, Donald, Daisy, and Pluto. Over the next few days I'll be uploading a video a day on the next ones. So I hope you check back for all of those, but I will also be putting links to them in the description box below as they are uploaded. So if you're watching this later on, check there to see what else is available. And don't forget to click subscribe to see all of my future videos as well. So I'm going to start with an overlay of white acrylic over the top of the entire nail, and I'm keeping this really thin. All of these little designs in this series, I kept them really on the thin side. I prefer to keep things that way, but it is thick enough that the white is opaque. So if your white is not as pigmented as mine, there are some that I know are way more pigmented than the one that I'm using, but there are some that aren't quite so much. Just make sure that you don't see any nail through it. You want it to actually be white, but just, you know, keep it thin, keep it on the thin side. And then after you have all of that white on there and it's nice and smooth, go ahead and add a layer of clear acrylic over the top. This is just for strength. I like to add clear acrylic on top of all of my designs, or on top of the backgrounds of all of my designs over the entire nail, just for strength in general. Plus, it kind of adds a cool, I don't know, half clear see-through depth that I kind of like as well. So then I'm going to take and I'm going to be filing this nail into shape, and I'm going to be using 2 bits and a hand file for this. So I'm going to start with a very coarse bit that's got a like a football shape. A cone shape, I guess, is probably more aptly described. But I'm just going to go and remove any lumps, bumps, bigger areas of issue. Just go through with that. And I'm also using my my dust collector, and then I'm going to take a finer bit that's actually really nice and smooth and remove scratches beautifully, and I'm just going to go over the top of the entire thing just to really make sure that this entire nail has like a velvety smoothness that's really nice. And then with a hand file, I'm just going to perfect the free edge. Now this is a little bit more in depth on what I go through for filing than what some of my videos are, but I just want to, you know, go through the 3 things there. So then I also added a layer of gel sealer and cured it. So now I'm going to be sculpting out my Mickey and Minnie Mouse with I'm going to begin with circles for their heads, and I'm using Cover Pink for this. And normally when you see me use Cover Pink for design, since mine is kind of like a jelly consistency, it's sort of, or not consistency, but opacity, it's kind of transparent, you can see stuff through it, but because the background is white, I can just go right to it instead of adding a layer of white underneath it, because there's already white underneath. So 2 circles for the circles of their heads, the base shape. And then I'm going to be adding their snouts, or their noses. I guess snout's not probably the right word, but their nose for each one of them. And I am looking at photo references for each of these characters as I am sculpting them, just to make sure that I am getting all of their facial features properly placed. So I added Minnie's nose, and then just a little bit of a dip down for her mouth, because her mouth is open. And then Mickey is kissing her on the cheek, so his nose kind of goes straight up in the air, right along the side of her head, just up, just like that. Make sure that I got that nice thick enough. You want their noses to be slightly thicker than their heads and stick out just a little bit higher up than the rest of their head, just like that. And then add just a little bit of his lower lip that is kissing her cheek. And then I'm going to be just touching it up, but then I'm going to go to black acrylic, and I'm going to be adding smaller circles for their ears. Now, you may be thinking that I should also be adding black acrylic on the backs of their heads, but I did that with paint later on. The reason I did it with paint instead of adding with the black acrylic is, one, for me, paint is easier to control in those nice smooth little lines that all of that, the backs of their heads are going to be. That's the first reason, that's the main one. But the other thing is, adding black acrylic on top of there instead of paint would also add thickness to the backs of their heads, and I didn't really want to give the backs of their heads any more thickness. I just wanted to give them the color. So hold off on that, and I know that they look very strange until they get that, but just wait for that. And so then I also added Mickey's body, and then I'm going to be adding both of the tips of their noses. So I started out with his, and then I'm going to be adding hers, just little tiny black noses on them, and then add a little bit more of that black inside Minnie's mouth, just a touch, and then a little bit of pink for her tongue. And then I'm going to go through with red, and I'm going to start adding her dress. So her dress is, well, it's red, but it's also got little cap sleeves. So I'm going to be first adding like the body of her dress, and then adding the sleeves. And I'm not going to be adding her arms quite yet. I will be adding those in just a moment though. And then I'm going to be adding her bow. So I'm going to sculpt out the first half, or the one curved side of the ribbon of the bow, just like that, with the red acrylic, and kind of pull it in and push it and give it that little Minnie Mouse, iconic Minnie Mouse bow shape, and then add the other half of her bow on the other side. And her bow almost completely covers up her ears. There's not much of her ears that shows after you have your bow on there, but it is important to have those ears because they do stick out just a little bit, and you want to make sure that if they do need to stick out that they have, or that they are. And then add the center of the bow with just a touch more of that red acrylic. When you're adding the center of the bow, make sure that your bead is a little bit on the thick side so it doesn't just bleed into the other parts of the bow. So now with black acrylic, once again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to be adding Mickey's arm, the one that's going and wrapping around and holding on to Minnie. And the reason that I kind of skip around a little bit and I didn't just finish off his arm after I did his body or after I did her dress is because I wanted to give those bits of acrylic a moment to set before I started adding a layer on top of them. This will help prevent color bleeding and messing up what you've already perfected and all of that. So you want to just kind of give your acrylic a moment to rest before you start adding more to it. And then I'm also going to be adding his hand on the end of his arm. And then you can also see her two hands, one that's resting on Mickey's arm and the other one that's going to be on his back. So there's the one that's on his arm, and then add just a little bit more, and this is with white acrylic. And I know that it's hard to see the white acrylic against the white background, but I will be highlighting it and outlining it, and you will actually be able to see it in just a moment once the painting starts getting done on there. And then I just decided to add a little bit of her skirt to the back side of her dress. So now I'm going to go through with black acrylic paint, and I'm going to start adding all of the details to my Mickey and my Minnie Mouse. So everything from this point forward is going to all be done with paint and not acrylic. So I'm going to start by outlining everything, just kind of going through and adding the base outlines here and there, making sure everything looks like it's in the proper spot. And I kind of like to start with the outlines because then once you start filling things in, like the backs of their heads, which I'm doing on Mickey right now, you've already got your baseline of where things are supposed to go, and for some reason it's easier to see and you just have a crisper idea of what you're aiming for. So there's the back of his head, and I'm going to be finishing off the back of her head just like that. And if you do all of a sudden realize that you did part of this wrong and you can't seem to remove the acrylic, a tiny bit of buffing will take the acrylic paint off of your acrylic. You might want to first try to remove as much as you can with some isopropyl alcohol, gently rubbing it, but otherwise a little bit of buffing is all it takes. And then also I'm going to be outlining their hands. Like I said, this is where their hands actually show up really nice and well. And then little bits of outlines on her dress. Because these are cartoon characters, I did pretty much outline everything, because you want to make sure that it's reminiscent of the characters, and they were all very outlined. Except for there's some modern takes on them now that Disney's using that don't have so many outlines, but I kind of like the iconic outline cartoon. I like that. I prefer that actually. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to be adding their facial features. Since both of their eyes are closed, I didn't add their eyes with acrylic beforehand as I did with the rest of the characters, but I do need to paint their eyelids on there. And Minnie Mouse also has her eyelashes, so you can't forget those. Those are extremely important. And then I'm also going to be doing Mickey's eyes, so he's got just the two little curves for his eyes and then the tops of his eyelids. And then I'm going to be adding the white polka dots all over Minnie's bow and over her dress. So I just took a little bit of white paint on my brush and pretty much filled in the entire thing with all sorts of polka dots. Lots and lots of polka dots. And then I'm going to be filling them in on the skirt of her dress. And then apply a layer of matte top coat over all of the 3D art that's on there. This nail is one of my absolute favorite nails that I've ever done. I am just in love with it. It's my favorite one of the series too. It's so iconic and I just adore it. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be making it into a ring here one of these days because I feel like that's necessary. And when I do, I might post some pictures on Instagram. So if you're curious on how that looks as a ring, check that out. And don't forget to share any recreations with me on Facebook and Instagram. I would absolutely love to see them, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!